Alrighty, so we're officially broadcasting. I want to welcome everyone and say thank you for tuning in to the North Cascade Audubon Society's presentation of Deadly Deception: The Plight of Birds and Plastic Pollution. I am Chelsea Macias. I'm the museum educator, and I'll be today's moderator. So what that means is I will be moderating both the chat and the Q&A functions. If you use your mouse or if you're using a touchscreen, you can kind of tap at the bottom of this webinar. Or if you're using a mouse, hover your mouse over the bottom to the toolbar. And there you should see a chat function and a Q&A function. Those are your two primary ways to interact with us. In the chat function, you can submit comments or questions, and everyone can interact with each other. So participants can interact within participants, and panelists can also submit answers or any additional comments. The Q&A function will be strictly for questions that you submit to the panelist. All questions and comments will be addressed by the panelists at the end of their presentation today. So I'll be kind of moderating and choosing highlighted questions and kind of bringing those up at the end to our panelists. So we're not ignoring your questions. We will get to them at the end of the program. I would like to kind of share my screen and do a little intro for what we've got going at the Whatcom Museum. So really big news for the Whatcom Museum. We are open. And let me put this in present. There we go. You can see this a little bit better. So the museum is now open, and our new hours are Wednesday through Sunday, 12 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We have quite a few programs going on just within the next couple weeks and through the fall. Here we have All In for Climate Action Week, turning the tables on Asian giant hornets. That's this Thursday, September 24th. We have a virtual Low Sensory Sunday, September 27th. On the 6th of October, we have a program we're putting together with the League of Women Voters towards a more perfect democracy panel. We have the History of Camp Glacier Civilian Conservation Corpse Project with the Whatcom Historical State Society. And a really big one that we've got coming up is our Speakeasy Soiree, which is a virtual silent auction to support the museum. We really appreciate anyone tuning in and supporting the museum as we're kind of navigating these, trying times. And lastly, October 9th, we have In Conversation with Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis. These, again, we have so many programs going on, so I just kind of fit a few of them here, but please visit our website, whatcommuseum.org, to find out about more programs you've got going on. Again, if you have any questions about, how to use this, I will be looking at the chat functions, so I can privately message you through chats to answer any questions. But I will go ahead and turn it over to the North Cascade Audubon Society's Jamie Hudson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Hewson. I'm the Vice President of the North Cascades Audubon Society. So thanks so much for tuning in for our monthly membership program. We've been doing these through the museum for many years now, and the museum has graciously been hosting our virtual events through the last few months here. So we're really excited for the program that we're putting on tonight. And before we get going into that, I'm just going to make a couple of quick announcements. There's just two of them. The first one is about something that we're doing called our Safe Start questionnaire or survey. And so if you would like to head on over to our website, northcascadesaudubon.org. Right at the top, there's a banner that says NCAS Safe Start questionnaire. We want to hear from you. And that's exactly what we're calling out, which is we do want to hear from you. We want to hear what kinds of programs you feel comfortable doing. We typically have things like field trips, our monthly membership meetings, talks at the libraries, all sorts of different things we've typically done. But we want to hear what you feel safe doing right now during this time. And we've had some great responses so far, and we would love to hear more about ideas that you all have. And of course, we want to hear, ways that we can help facilitate birding and conservation around our area, and that's what we're all about. So please, this survey is going to be closing in at the end of tomorrow. So you have today and tomorrow to reply to that. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and go to our website and click that at the top. It's very short. It should take you less than 5 minutes to complete that survey. The other thing I wanted to just ask people about is what birds people are seeing. So go ahead in the chat function if you want to just shout out what different types of birds you might have been seeing at your feeders right now, or maybe you've gone out birding to some great locations. I know some folks have been seeing some fall migration birds happening right now. So feel free to just shout that out in the chat. And I just wanted to give a quick plug for the Whatcom Birds listserv. So if you haven't joined already, you can join the listserv by going to our website under birding, and you can go to Whatcom Birds. And this is a listserv where people chat and post what birds they're seeing. So if you'd like to know what birds are coming through our area, or you see a cool bird at your feeder, or maybe some birds are flying by, or you get a picture of a bird and you want to help identifying it, go ahead and join the Whatcom Birds listserv and get some cool information through that. Cool. So without further ado, we're going to start our presentation. So I just want to give a quick introduction to our two speakers tonight. We have Chris Brewer and Jaco Hove, who are joining us. So Chris Brewer is an Audubon board member and a lifelong career spent teaching and has an ecology degree. She's currently working on environmental issues and is teaching science and psychology at Fairhaven College. Jaco retired in 2017 after 30 years as a Unitarian Universalist minister in the Seattle area and lives in Bellingham co-housing. And he has a longstanding interest in waste reduction, has certified WSU master composter and recycler, and is avidly working towards solutions in waste management. He manages 2 co-housing waste corrals and parts of the compost zone, and efforts have saved over $1,000 a year by reducing landfill waste. So we're really excited to hear both the programs that they're going to be talking about tonight. So to kick it off, let's turn it over to Chris.
Chris, you're muted.
Great. Well, you got a moment there to sneeze or get a drink of water or something. I want to thank Chelsea and the Whatcom Museum for hosting our program tonight. And I also want to thank the North Cascades Audubon Society for their ongoing and ever-present commitment to conservation issues. I also want to thank all of you that came tonight, because really it's our collective interest and commitment that will make a difference in some of these critical issues. So to let you know, I will be starting the program out, and I'm going to focus on the impacts of plastic pollution on ocean creatures, specifically seabirds. And while land birds are also having impact from plastic pollution, tonight's focus will be seabirds. And when I've completed a little overview about that and some of the issues in particular that they face, Jaco is going to follow through with a lot of really wonderful information about plastic pollution in general and some of the ways that this is being worked on and solved and what we can do as individuals. So we'll look forward to that. So I want to say that let's see, let's get this going. Here we go. There are more than 350 species of birds that depend on the marine environment. And so many of these birds you may have seen and appreciate and enjoy whenever you can see them. Some you may not get a chance to see because they rarely come ashore unless it's to nest on as remote as possible a place in the world. But right now, in 1960, the population was 1.5 billion for seabirds. Right now, 60 years later, we're looking at about 500 million. So that's a population decline of about 2/3. So while in 1960, you may have seen 3 birds, today you would only see 1. One of the reasons for this is plastics pollution, and the number of seabirds that are dying each year from pollution by plastics is 1 million and rising. And in particular, seabird populations are declining faster than any other group of birds. Unfortunately, also rising is plastics ocean pollution. So it's proposed that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish by weight in our oceans. And that's something that the Story of Stuff addresses as well in their program. So I invite you all to look at thestoryofstuff.com to look at how our consumerism and lack of recycling and taking care of plastic pollution is creating some great problems. But meanwhile, what we know is that it's about 8 million tons of plastic each year are dumped into the oceans. That's about 5 trillion plastics. So we're looking at a lot of plastics that can be found all the way around the world. We might see it floating on the surface, and we will also see it if we were to get to the bottom of the ocean in places like the Mariana Trench. So it's pretty well integrated into our ocean. Now by 2050, National Audubon has projected that 90% of all seabird species, will have plastic in their digestive tracts. They also say by 2050 that 95% of all individual seabirds will have ingested plastics. So how does plastic pollution harm birds? Well, one of the main reasons is through entanglement, and face it, plastic is tough. So unless you have opposable thumbs and scissors, once you are entangled, the result is probably going to be death by starvation, strangulation, suffocation, or drowning. Fishing line and abandoned nets and hooks are a major source of bird entanglement and death, and the World Animal Protection Organization estimates that there's about 640,000 tons of fishing gear that are left in the oceans annually. Fishing line kills more pelicans than any source, and it's a long-term problem. Monofilament line, for instance, can take 600 years to break down. So this little bird may be in a challenging situation in this moment, but that challenging situation will last for another 600 years or 6 centuries. That's a long time. And plastic pollution is really a global issue. So you'll see in this presentation references to continents around the world, and it truly is occurring globally. So these are northern gannets in Europe, Germany, and Netherlands, suffering from entanglement in different ways. Fishing nets are another way that entanglement is a serious issue, and bycatch is the way that birds that are not the target, of course, of the net, accidentally become entangled in underwater nets. And in a 2013 review of just the reported bycatch estimates, it suggests that 400,000 birds die in gill nets each year, and also that 148 bird species have been identified as susceptible. But it's not only birds. We're going to talk tonight about birds, but it's lots of other creatures. In fact, 800 species of marine mammals and animals are endangered by entanglement. There are other forms of plastic that result in deadly entanglement. So as you can see, this white stork is totally enclosed in plastic, and it's not unusual to see a bird with a beak, a wing, a leg, a whole body, trapped in plastic bags. Chances of them being able to fly is pretty well minimal, so you can guess the future for this stork. Or for this American oyster catcher. And many of the configurations of plastic that gets set loose in the ocean are such that once they're entangled, that's pretty much the end of it for them. Now, balloons. This kind of scenario, the balloon release for a celebration, a memorial, is something that's very endearing for us. But for birds, the releases don't have the same meaning. And in reality, when you look at the deadliest ocean trash, fishing gear tops it at #1. Plastic bags are number 2, along with a lot of the other plastic utensils that we set loose. But balloons are number 3, followed by cigarette butts and bottle caps, and the list goes on. But besides getting entangled in plastics, birds actually eat plastics, and they often feed plastics to their young. So that ingestion will result in filling the young's stomach, and it happens to adults too, with non-nutritious elements so that they actually starve to death even though their stomachs are full. Or it may cause a blockage of their intestine and cause starvation that way. There's also absorption of toxic poisons, and we'll talk about that a little later. So over time, little by little, what they eat accumulates. One study found up to 200 pieces of plastics in birds, which actually represents about 8% of the bird's body weight. So consider that that additional 8% might make it very difficult for a bird to fly. Well, and then there are microbeads. So these are those tiny plastic particles that we intentionally have put into rinse-off cosmetics and exfoliating products like toothpaste, shampoo, makeup, cleaning products. And although they were banned in 2015 in the United States, 15 countries have also banned microbeads, but the ban focuses on rinse-off exfoliating products, but does not include some of the other products. So there's more work to be done there. And then there's also microplastics, which really are large pieces of plastic that the ultraviolet light and ocean currents have broken down into small pieces around 5 millimeters. In addition, these microplastics come from our fleece and synthetic clothing, which every time you wash it, reportedly sheds about 2,000 pieces of microplastics. That's a lot of plastics. And just to give you a sense of the extent of where this is happening, 12,000 pieces of microplastics were found in 1 liter of Arctic sea ice. So it's reached the poles, and it makes you wonder what will happen when more and more ice melt. Well, when microplastics are ingested, they can harm birds and animals, and it's interesting that a 2018 study found that the microplastics actually move up through the food chain. So from larvae and zooplankton and filter feeders all the way up, and think about those oysters and whatnot, clams that you eat, because they may have microplastics. So research is still underway, but it has found that they can actually impair reproductive functions. They definitely could reduce nutritional uptake, and in some creatures they can result in death. So we are surrounded by it. And one would wonder, even though we are surrounded by it and it's in the oceans, why would birds eat plastic? Well, is it a case of mistaken identity? Is that puffin there with a little blue piece of plastic thinking that it's the same as the wriggly fish that will feed it and its young? Well, it is the fact that sometimes plastic looks like food. I'm sure you can tell the difference between the jellyfish and the plastic bags here, but not everyone can. And sometimes bird food comes packaged in plastics, and although I think that heron's going to enjoy its fish, it will also take in the plastic bag. Who's to say what kind of harm that will do? But one of the deadliest deceptions about plastic is that plastics smell like food. So a sulfurous scent has guided some marine birds to food for thousands of years. In fact, 48% of seabirds use smell to find food. And the smell may be responsible for tricking many pelagic birds into foraging and to eating plastic. So here's how it goes. We throw something plastic in the ocean. It gets dumped in there by one of the garbage truckfuls per minute that empty into the ocean full of garbage. And algae grows on it. It takes less than a month to grow that algae. And the algae, a lot of it, is this microscopic phytoplankton, little single-celled organisms that make their own food. And they also contain dimethyl sulfonopropionate, which is much easier to say as DMPS. So they contain this chemical, And when the algae is eaten, and for example, by small krill, which is a real keystone oceanic species, everything from birds to fish eat this. They're very tiny, 2-inch crustacean, zooplankton. And when they eat that, they actually do some amazing chemical transformation. So as you can see here, they don't actually live alone. They live in swarms. And so take, for example, a bird looking for food or looking to smell food. It's not going to smell the single one, but you'll bet it's going to find that swarm. And when krill eat algae or the cells break down in any other way or are crushed, then that DMSP is broken down to dimethyl sulfide, DMS. And dimethyl sulfide is the key odorant that triggers foraging activity in some marine birds. So here's in recap. Plastic goes in the ocean, gathers algae. Krill come and find the algae and they eat it, breaking it down and releasing the DMS, which the birds find is a way of locating their food. So pelagic birds, those that remain at sea for long periods of time, sometimes even years, rely on smell to find food. In particular, the tube-nosed birds have these elongated tubes on their beak that smells, and they can especially smell this odorant. In fact, they're 6 times more likely to eat plastics than other birds because they can smell the DMS so well. So these birds may skim the water surface for food. Keep in mind that these pelagic birds, they're looking for food in an ocean. And so they travel long distances and they skim the water, they look for food. When they see something, they go for it. Or they may sit on the water and seize the prey from the surface. And when they do, they'll eat anything that floats, the squid, the fish, crustacean, fish eggs, or plastic. And the plastic, to them, is just like everything else that the ocean has to offer, its sustenance. So let's look a little at the tube-nosed seabirds. There's 120 species, basically in these 4 different categories. And nearly half of the tube-nosed species have declining populations. So looking at the northern fulmar, for instance, they forage exclusively at sea, generally near the surface. And as you can see, they're all around our North American continent here. And a University of British Columbia study examined their stomach contents and found that of 67 fulmars, 92% had ingested plastics. So they found an average of 33 to 38 pieces per bird, which is about 5% of their body weight. There's another study that came out of Europe, and the fulmars also live around the European continent. So they have a 14-year study, ongoing study of looking at fulmars, and they found that in their 14 years, 93% had ingested plastics, average of about 26 pieces. So these birds and other birds, it's not just the tube-nosed that are finding and eating plastics, it's just the tube-nosed have a good way of finding it in the vastness of the ocean. They may find a single floating piece, or maybe a little above and below the water, or maybe quite a collection from which they can pick their favorite. Or they may find this, and many of you may know about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's one of the 5 plastic gyres around the world that collect the trash that is thrown into the oceans. And these currents and winds create a vortex that rotates clockwise around and sort of gathers and converges all of the garbage into one big collection that at this point, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is 77 million square miles and it's 30 plus feet deep. That's more than twice the size of Texas. So NOAA estimates that it would take 67 ships a year to clean up just 1% of it. And I know Jaco is going to talk a little bit more about how that's already started, so we'll look forward to that. And what happens when plastics meet land in the convergence zones? So this is an issue. And here we have the Midway Atoll. It's a national wildlife refuge in the northern Hawaiian Islands. the middle of the convergence zone. And this is what that looks like. So that annually 5 tons of marine debris washes ashore, this being in the center of that convergence zone. So, you know, Midway is just 2.4 square miles. It also has the largest albatross breeding colony in the world. And it has 23 bird species, and 17 are seabirds, but 400,000 pairs of Laysan albatross nest there every year, and that's about 70% of the global population. But about a third of the black-footed albatross also nest at Midway. That's another 24,000 breeding pairs. So basically this 2.4 square mile island is wall-to-wall birds. Birds living pretty much in the plastic habitat. So about of the 400,000 breeding pairs, about 320,000 chicks are successfully born each year. And albatross only lay 1 egg. So 80,000 don't hatch, 320,000 do, and of those, 40% die before fledging. And how does that happen? Well, you know, albatross have those great wings. They can soar for miles on, and after they've hatched their young, they leave for a couple weeks, even 1 or 2 weeks, and will travel thousands of miles to look for food. And they fill their stomachs with food. That would be squid and crustaceans and parts of fish. And they return and feed their young what they find by regurgitating both a really nutritious stomach oil and whatever else is in their stomach, which frequently contains plastics. If you want to find more about that, check out albatrossthefilm.com, which is put together by Chris Jordan, who's seen here. He's on the Midway Atoll. He's a great photographer, and he's dissecting a dead albatross. He's not alone in that. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is there doing the same thing, and conservation agencies, and they're working, trying to figure out what to do about this. But what they found is 97% of the dead albatross adults have plastics in them, and 89% of dead chicks have ingested plastics. So you can see that this is a serious issue, and the birds are going to need some help, and we're going to need help. One of the other problems about plastics is that they release toxins. I don't know how many of you look to find water bottles that don't have BPAs. Birds can't do that, and so they're getting a lot of petroleum-based toxins and PCBs and BPAs. And on top of that, the plastics absorb other toxins when they're in the water. So they're absorbing heavy metals and organophosphates. A study found that they continue to absorb chemical pollutants ongoing. Concentrations increase with time. So what the birds are ingesting are not only plastics that can wreak havoc in their body, but plastics that can release toxins. So they do harm birds in non-lethal ways. Some of these birds may not die, and some do. This is a recent study that just finished in Tasmania. It was a 4-year study by an ecotoxicologist. And she was looking at flesh-footed shearwater populations that have decreased 29% in the last few years. One of the things she found was that 90% of those birds had plastic and high toxic chemical levels. And the obvious is birds with the most plastic had the worst contamination. The less obvious is that birds with any plastic had significant health issues. And so she looked at the blood samples, did stomach checks of fledglings, and I just want to let you know that no fledglings were killed for this study. They developed a non-invasive way of determining stomach contents. And what they found was even one piece resulted in toxic symptoms. And those would be impaired kidney function, high cholesterol, whatever that means to a bird, a low BMI, which resulted in a shorter bill and wing length and a smaller head. And in some years, 60% of them exceeded the targets for plastic ingestion in birds, 16% after only one feeding. Their plastic ingestion and toxic impacts is the highest of any marine invertebrate. So the study raised one other question: why some birds and not others? And it raised that question because the wedge-tailed shearwaters that breed nearby and they feed in the same area have less plastic and less toxicity. So this is their next question to look at. There's a lot we don't know right now about plastic pollution, but there are a lot of things that we know. And that is that it is a deadly problem. So just to recap a little bit about what's being done in terms of the things we talked about, I just want to look at a little bit at bird bycatch from lost and abandoned nets, and also entanglement in its many forms, and just share with you some of the positive things before we go on to Jaco's sharing. So in the Puget Sound, and way back in 1999, the salmon fishery did a study, and they were looking at this bird bycatch problem of birds being inadvertently caught in underwater nets. So they tried a couple things. They tried making the nets more visible. They used LED lights, and it decreased the bird death by 45%, but not in nighttime dives. So they tried making them audible, and they put acoustic pingers on them and reduced bird bycatch by 50%. But it actually made the mammals curious and increased their catch. So sometimes our solutions work and sometimes they don't. But some of the newer ones that are actually working pretty well is the prevention by design. So recently, Korean scientists developed nets that biodegrade by microbes in 2 years. So think about that, 2 years of problem nets versus 500-600 years. It's an improvement. I don't know what the fish think about that, but that's one of the things that's happening. Another is recycling a fishing line, and Berkeley Recycling in Iowa has been a leader in that. They designed this really simple way of collecting recycled fishing line, and they put it at 17,000 sites. They also send out their instructions so you can build your own. So I know there's a lot more than 17,000 sites out there collecting fishing line. And then they are upcycling them. So here's a great use of it. This has actually been melted down and reformed into artificial fish habitat. And fish habitat is made by a number of different organizations. This one I really like. It's the Chilean approach to recycling fishing line. 50 square feet of fishing line becomes a skateboard. I think that's great. In terms of abandoned net collection, Global Ghost Nets Initiative has 90 members worldwide, and they collect ghost nets from around the world. In the United States, California has removed more than 1 million feet of monofilament line. In Washington State, the Northwest Straits Initiative has removed more than 6,000 pieces of derelict gear from Puget Sound, Sailor Sea, and they also have a phone and web-based no-fault reporting system, and then they follow up with removal. Finally, there has been more legislation. The gill nets are now being legislated to be not allowed in certain rivers or estuaries in various states and countries, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more of that. Finally, there's you. So Washington Coast Savers is just one example of people who patrol the beaches and the waterways and collect plastics and save them from being in the ocean. So you have options like that, and also a lot of solutions that Jaco is going to share about changing human reliance on plastics. So I want to give a shout out to Jaco. I saw his presentation, oh gosh, a few months ago about this issue, and he really inspired me with all the information that he could share about what's really happening with plastic pollution and what can be done and what is being done. So thank you, Jaco, for that. It encouraged me to find out more about what's happening with the birds and to share it with you. And Jaco, I'd like now to turn it over to you.
Hey, I'm going to share screen now myself. Here we go. Hello, everybody. And thanks to Chris for that wonderful presentation. That set the stage for me. And I'm happy to carry on. I'm a master composter and recycler, trained by Washington State University, happily. And I've created a handout with references and links, a 3-page handout that will be available afterwards. It looks like we were trying to get it to you directly at this program, but it looks like it's going to have to be on the website. We'll get some information about that in a minute. So, you may recall from The Graduate, 1967, Dustin Hoffman's character. I just want to say one word to you, my fellow. Are you listening? Yes, sir, he says. Plastics. There's a great future in plastics. Indeed, for more than 50 years, global production and consumption of plastics have indeed risen. Part of it is through these water bottles that are so ubiquitous still among us, that may be devilishly inspired by profit motives. Or there's the old message in the bottle, which we don't get so much anymore. We have instead tons and tons of plastic bottles in the ocean. And it gets situations like this, which is not a cartoon, or like this, any beach, planet Earth. You're familiar with some of these pictures. But the Washington Post, even in its editorial not too long ago, called this a crisis in our oceans, and every human should be alarmed by it. So stay with me. Yes, there's a problem with the pollution, but I'm also going to get to a path to solutions. So that's where I'm headed. Many people, as we know, are passive or actively not caring in the face of this onslaught of plastic pollution. Some do care. Hopefully you are here tonight because you do care. The increasingly visual horrors are finally galvanizing people into organizations such as Plastic Oceans, a nonprofit raising awareness about plastic pollution to inspire behavioral change. They have a wonderful movie called A Plastic Ocean. Wonderful, maybe not the right word. They're also inspiring a global movement to rethink plastic. And they have a kids program that's free on the website, plasticoceans.org. It's about a 10-minute film for kids 10 and younger that teaches them about plastic pollution and what they can do to be a part of the solution. So I recommend Earth's Echo. They're also a key signatory to the Ocean Plastics Charter. Even though the United States has not signed it, many other countries and organizations have, and it's come out of the 2018 G7 Summit, the Plastic Oceans Charter. Another group is called Plastic Pollution Coalition, a growing alliance of many different organizations and individuals working toward a world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impacts. They have an interesting and helpful discussion of the 4 primary facets of the plastic pollution problem. The first is waste, tons of waste. Second, toxicity, lots of different, these are human. Chris talked about all the bird and animal toxicity, but this is all about what happens to humans. It's a climate change issue because plastic is made of petroleum, non-renewable fossil fuel. And in fact, plastic the plastic pollution and climate change are parallel global emergencies. So we must reduce our plastic footprint, which was an interesting expression. I hadn't quite heard that before I ran into this. And then there's social injustice, about fence line communities, countries of the global south and communities of color that are impacted most dramatically by being so close to the pollution. A fence line community is a neighborhood immediately adjacent to a polluter, directly affected by its noise and toxicities. Ocean Conservancy, another great group working to create science-based solutions for a healthy ocean. And they have one of their programs is called Protecting Florida, with amazing and very helpful operations down there. They did a trash collection on the beaches that in 2017 turned up all these plastic issues. That the top 10 trash items were all about plastic. Even the ones that don't say plastic in the title really are plastic, or foam, which is a kind of plastic. So plastics has been creeping into the top 10 list over the years. Coastalcare.org, another good organization that's raising awareness of the many unsustainable practices. Plus, they educate children about the science of natural beaches and empower them to act to protect their coastal environments, so we don't have to see a situation like this in the future where they go to the ocean aquarium to look at the different types of plastic in the water. They also have a wonderful article called When the Mermaids Cry, The Great Plastic Tide. Very informative and recently updated on their website. The link for that will also be in the on the handout. Certainly it's a big problem for sea creatures, as Chris has described so adequately, but it's also for humans. And the decomposition rates, I mentioned 600 years for fishing line. Plastic bottles takes 450 years. Foamed plastic cups, 50 years. Just an enormous amount of time for these things to decompose. Plastic is extremely successful because it doesn't decompose. So the gyres, the Five Gyres, the one that's in the Great Pacific garbage patch area between San Francisco and Hawaii, is, as mentioned, more than 30 feet deep. And I just wanted to emphasize this because some of the trash looks like it's floating on the water, and that's what you see pictures of from above, but a lot more is suspended just below the water and caught up largely by netting and things. And it just is this 30-foot deep patch. There's an organization called Five Gyres out of San Francisco that is, again, empowering young people especially to address this. So which future do you want? On the left, you see from 1950 to 2050, 100 years, and the potential from today, 2018 when this was drafted, the plastic production is scheduled and looks like it's going to go sky high by 2050. Tons more plastic with very little recycled. But can we reduce the amount of plastic produced and still recycle more? But the key is not recycling. The key is less plastic. That's the future that we want. So it's a large challenge, but take heart. What's past is prologue, and look at acid rain. Back in the day, many of us might remember when acid rain was this horrible thing that people were just wringing their hands about, but through action, it's reduced. Not gone away necessarily, but you hardly ever hear any talk about acid rain anymore because we addressed it, we got after it. The river that was on fire in Northeast Ohio, the Cuyahoga River, was so polluted, and it helped to spur the environmental movement in the US. Well, today they have a festival every year called the Cuyahoga River Rebirth Day because it's so cleaned up, as is the Hudson River. So we can address these things. We can do this. Drunk driving used to be, oh, well, people are going to drive drunk. What are you going to do? Well, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving strategically and effectively removed the social permission for this destructive activity. It still happens, but at a much lower rate. These things were once thought to be impossible to address, and yet people intentionally went after them, and that's where we're at right now. We need to get up the energy to do that. The successful resolution of the crisis is clear. We are the problem, and we are the solution. So first, manual cleanup, as Chris mentioned. There are some efforts. One fellow took a big long boom out into the Pacific Ocean trying to collect some from the garbage patch out there, and it failed. And so he brought it back in, and he's working to reconfigure it now. But there's a trash monster in Baltimore that keeps the Baltimore harbor clean. You can see over here the solar panels and the water wheel provide all the energy it needs. It's got these big googly eyes, so it's become really popular in the area. But the conveyor belt here just scoops up all the stuff that comes to it like this, comes from here, and it just sits there and scoops it all up and processes it into containers that can then taken out. It's called MrTrashWheel.com. And there's a whole social media campaign around it now that's very popular in Baltimore, and it's really helping the harbor. Another thing we need to have is a culture of behavioral change and some consensus that needs to arise at all levels, all these different levels. We need to get a consensus for behavioral changes. And in that effort, this Ellen MacArthur Foundation has issued a report some years ago, actually, to the World Economic Forum called The New Plastics Economy, promoting a circular economy for plastic. And that's a very key phrase, circular economy. And this is a website that is really fascinating to see what Ellen MacArthur, who is a sailor of some renown, a racer and a world traveler on the water. She's created this foundation in England that has done this, and they propose to eliminate and innovate and circulate all the plastic items, so to keep the economy is more circular for plastic. Education, legislation, and awareness, of course, are always important. Advocacy all that very important, so that there's a bill, two bills in the legislation in California, for instance, called the Circular Economy and Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. In the US Congress, there's Save Our Seas. The first one was signed into law in 2018, and the 2.0 is an even better one that's currently under discussion in the US Congress. So these are ways of legislating, and we need a lot more of them as well. Extending producer responsibility, often phrased as EPR, its initials, are these campaigns associating plastic producers with the damage to the common good that have, and those campaigns have proven that change can happen. Nestle, for instance, was addressed by Greenpeace people with this huge, giant plastic monster in front of their headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And some corporations are actually leading the way, like Patagonia produced the first polyester fleece jacket from recycled bottles in 1993. And their product line is now expanded to include 82 items with recycled polyester. They recycle plastic bottles, manufacturing waste, worn out garments, such that 84% of their fabrics are made with recycled polyester, a great model, Patagonia. The Lego company in Denmark has announced a plan that they're going to stop making plastic Legos and turn that into something more sustainable. Then there's philosophy. So imagine legal recognition and therefore legal protection of nature. New Zealand, excuse me, they have a river in the North Island that has been classified as a living entity. It's their third longest river, very important to the Maori people. Now it has its own legal identity, rights, duties, and liabilities of a legal person. Here, we give that to corporations. In New Zealand, they give that to rivers and parks. So we could do that if we had the will, collective will, to give legal recognition to our landscapes. And science. There's a tentative hope through green chemistry and a, quote, benign by design concept. Here's a few examples how recycled plastics are being transformed into 3D printing material in Denmark again. Or this Israeli company has figured out how to turn household garbage into thermoplastics. Interesting story. It's closing the loop, they say, on unsustainable waste disposal. Again, providing a path to a truly circular economy. However, and then there's plastic bonds, breaking the plastic bonds, a chemical technique that breaks down the bonds that form polyethylene, which is what makes plastic bags so indestructible. The process chops it up and turns it into liquid oil. Okay. However, there is much debate and skepticism about chemical recycling of plastic. The plastic industry thinks chemical recycling can help solve our plastic problems, but others disagree. This was a CNBC article recently. There's a serious disagreement over priorities. The industry says we should let the free market decide. The profit motive helps things, and the process is just beginning, so it's going to evolve and improve. Environmentalists say this chemical recycling is an expensive distraction from the real goal, which is less plastic. We need laws and taxes on plastic production proportional to the damage done by plastic waste. And it's much better to drive growth in the market for alternatives and incentivize consumers to use reusable material instead. So finally, we come to recycling and zero waste concept, because it all starts simply with individual choices. That is the enormous task, and yet also the enormous power, because it resides within each and every one of us to stop plastic hemorrhaging at the source, which is us. So anyone can help by avoiding undue consumption, especially of plastic, and at least recycling as much as possible. It's been going on for a while, evidently, so why not us? So there's much debate and skepticism about recycling of plastic in general. As you may know, there was just recently this month, a big NPR piece that revealed how the oil and gas industry used the promise of plastic recycling to sell more plastic, even when they knew it would never work on a large scale. And so they're using this money of theirs to build incredible petrochemical manufacturing plants. Here's one, the new one in Texas. Here's the Cancer Alley in Louisiana, along the Mississippi River there, right here. Whoops, sorry, back. The Mississippi River here. They're going to build a 14-plant plastics production plant that will rise, built by Formosa Plastics, a Taiwanese company. So the big oil and big plastic are very busy and spending a lot of money investing in the future of making even more plastics. And we don't really know what happens to plastic recycling when it leaves our hands. This is true. There have been a number of stories. Plastic recycling is a myth. Your recycling actually gets recycled, right? Not always. There's some truth to this. We don't really know. It goes usually, from here especially, it goes overseas, across the Pacific, where it's mishandled or they attempt to do the right thing. But really only about 10% of America's plastic gets recycled. And that's a crying shame. And we don't even know what happens to that because we don't recycle it very much in our country at all. So it's out of our hands. And we tend to put it out of our minds, but it's a fact that we don't really know. So do we give up then and just not bother recycling plastics because we don't know for sure that it's actually being recycled, or what we know is that a lot of it isn't? But I say no, we take heart. We take heart and we act to be the change we want to see. This is a paraphrase of a Gandhian message that has activated my life for many years, that we can't know the end result of our behavior. We just have to do the right thing now and act as if the change were already happened, because that improves the odds that it will happen. This is part of our rethinking that we are required to do, to refuse single-use plastics, to reduce our use of all plastics, to reuse what we can, and to recycle. There at the very bottom, recycling is the last option. People just chuck it in the recycling bin right away, and they don't think about reusing it or not buying it in the first place. So all of these charts will always put recycling at the bottom. And a key question is, even if only about 10% of the plastic is recycled, wouldn't you rather be found in that group instead of the 90% that has given up or doesn't care? We should be the change we want to see. And we're not alone. There's global zero waste groups all over especially Europe. Lots of people trying to do their part around the world, and some of them are ahead of us in this country, in fact. Even the NSA, the National Security Agency, I found on their website that they have a mascot called Dunk that wants you to recycle. Zero waste concept, as many of you know, encourages the design of resource life cycles to build a circular economy, and any trash sent to the landfills is minimal. And similar to we learn how resources are reused in nature. It's called biomimicry. I really recommend you look up biomimicry, a wonderful concept and science about learning from the Earth's techniques. I happen to have been born in Wisconsin. I didn't know they had a mountain range there. Oh, not a mountain range. Anyway, here's some more good news from the Good News Network. That here's a guy who built canoes out of plastic bottles. Look at those things, amazing. There's a Vietnamese entrepreneur who has created biodegradable straws out of the sedge grass that grows in the swamps of the Mekong River Delta. And these straws can last for 6 months. Great idea coming out of Vietnam. So the top 10 tips include avoiding single-use plastic, not engaging or not even touching plastic water bottles is what my philosophy. I pick them up to recycle them, but I try not to even touch them. And to use recyclable bags, among other things here. Many of these you know, but again, look at number 10, recycling is the last resort. Now our neighbor to the north, up there in Vancouver, they're on it. They have a whole philosophy of, they want to be the greenest city in the world. And so their triangle again has recycling near the bottom and avoiding at the top. So the gist of the zero waste lifestyle is that anything aimed toward landfill should instead be considered first for repurposing and then composting and then recycling. And especially we want to avoid single-use plastics. So a quick study of where does it go from you when you recycle your rigid or your soft plastics. Here in Bellingham, it goes to Parberry's Northwest Recycling down there on C Street at Holly, where Marty Kujlis is a very helpful operations manager. Here he is standing in front of the hard plastic pile. He was featured in this article in July of 2018 about our pre-sorting recycling here, which is much better than single stream. He still has markets for his recycling because we pre-sort at the curb in Bellingham and have for many years, where Seattle, Portland, other places, they all do single stream, and the paper in particular just pollutes and contaminates the rest of the recycling, and they people don't want it from them, so they don't have any markets for it, but we do, happily. So the local company, SSC, Sanitary Services Company, will pick up solid rigid plastics, but not soft film plastics such as bags, packaging, bubble wrap. That kind of softer film plastic can be taken directly to Northwest Recycling or to local grocery stores if the soft plastics are clean and dry. But not to grocery stores right now during the pandemic, because most stores have, in fact, removed their soft plastic recycling bins during the pandemic, alas, and we're hoping they will come back soon. You can start your own soft film plastic recycling, create your own collection station, and then take the bundled soft plastic to Northwest Recycling or hold on to it somewhere until the store sites become available again. There's various best practices that I don't have a lot of time to go into, unfortunately, but mostly it's key that it's clean and dry. That's the key takeaway, that you don't mix in the hard plastics, and that because moisture creates mold when they pack it all together. And here's a best practice for rigid plastic. If you have to use plastic, always choose items that are in clear or white containers, because dark colored plastic and black plastic are the most difficult to recycle and have a much lower market value. So you can choose what kinds of plastic you use if you have to use plastic. And I just want to end with a mention of The Story of Plastic, which Chris mentioned earlier. It's an 85-minute film that I have seen that is a product of the Story of Stuff project, dedicating to changing the way that we make, use, and throw away stuff so that it's more sustainable. And you can learn more about the story of plastic, a very telling movie at storyofplastic.org. They said very clearly in this movie, plastic pollution is everywhere we look, smothering our oceans and poisoning communities around the world. Meanwhile, big plastic only plans to expand production. We need to chart a different course. And to chart a different course, my closing thought is for you to consider your own plastic footprint. So there you have it, and I'm hoping that maybe by now there'll be a way to get to the handout that I produced for this. On share screen. Here we go. Maybe that didn't do it. There we go. Okay, great.
Thank you, Jaco. I was able to put the handout in the chat in the chat box, so I got it onto a Google Drive and shared the link. So all the participants can use that link, and it'll be active as as long as you have it. So feel free to copy and paste it somewhere that you can easily access. So it is approaching the end of our time, but we are happy to stay on and answer any questions. For those of you who have to take off, thank you for coming and for interacting and participating in our presentation here. So I will be moderating and acting as the person who reads aloud any questions. Someone asked, first question we have here, do the polar fleece clothing products shed microplastics? So I'll open that up to both of our panelists here.
Well, it depends how they're made. And the Patagonia ones, they recycle most of their own clothing. Or if you bring it back to them, they will. I'm not sure whether it actually sheds microplastics or not, but they don't use many microplastics in their production. Other companies, I can't speak for.
Another question we have here is just if this is going to be available by recording. So we have been recording this program. Once this is done, it'll take some time to download, and I will most likely give this to the North Cascades Audubon Society. So if they wish to, they can put the video on their website. So first we have to edit and sorry, go ahead.
On the handout will be my email address, and you can book me to do this again anywhere. And I usually do it in a whole hour by myself. You heard me talking pretty fast. I was able to leave a lot of my slides out because Jamie covered some of the same ground, but I have another show that is a little bit longer and then allows a lot more time for back and forth. So feel free to contact me if you want me to do this for your group.
Awesome. Alrighty, it looks like Jamie just put a link to their website at the North Cascades Audubon.org. And yeah, any other questions? Got our lovely panelists waiting to answer. I think I'll say that I was kind of shocked to learn about how much is actually getting recycled. 10%, I feel like is just
not even. It's less than 10%.
Even, right? And so I was a little taken aback by that.
Yeah. I think we're going to hit bottom. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. The whole recycling industry is struggling. When China shut down their importing of all of our waste, it shouldn't have, but it did catch us off guard, and our whole system was designed to ship everything over to China in the empty barges that brought all their goods over to us. And so that's all out the window now, and recycling centers are going out of business every day, and they're having to retool and figure out a way to make things economic because there's not a lot of market for recycled products. So it's really all about reducing our use of stuff that is going to make a difference. And unless we can change that behavior, things are going to continue to get worse pollution-wise from plastics especially.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job at outlining those steps before, recycling, is that there's so much we can do before we get to that step. A couple questions we have here. Any recommended volunteer opportunities here in Washington?
Audubon Society, I would say, certainly, and the Salmon SEA, Salmon Enhancement Association. I can't remember what the acronym stands for. SEA. They have a magnificent program that helps the inland waters, especially the rivers, for the salmon. So that's one that I would recommend a lot. The Sustainable Connections is doing a lot with food waste issues, which is a whole nother story of interesting dynamics. So look for Sustainable Connections, and resources. RE-Sources is another group that's very active that are looking for volunteers as well.
Another question by Jan. Do you know of any plastic awareness residencies for artists?
No. Plastic artists. Well, that's one way to repurpose plastic, is to turn it into art. We have a person in co-housing who has made a number of interesting sculptures and things out of things she's pulled out of the dumpster and some of the toters that we have here. So that's I do repurposing found objects into art is a noble and a long-standing artistic tradition, but I don't know of any internships.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Allied Arts in in Bellingham here has a program, usually an annual program about recycled art. And this year, I'm sure it's not really happening, but it has happened every year. And they've done fun things like recycled art fashion shows where you make your own fantastic clothing and sculptures out of recycled objects, and then exhibits and whatnot too. So that's one of the things that artists do in our area.
Mm-hmm. Someone in our chat also asked for beach cleanup opportunities, and just so everyone also can see, Jamie from the North Cascades put Puget Soundkeepers and the Washington Coast Savers. Deborah Kaye asked for resources for sustainable communities. Oh, sorry, they just made a comment saying resources for sustainable communities also have programs too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy Joseph in our chat asked, any estimates or info on how the pandemic has increased use of single-use plastic?
I didn't mention it because it just pains me so. The the increase in single-use plastics has just skyrocketed with the pandemic, because you can't bring your own containers into the bulk food places anymore, and everybody's taking out and from restaurants and having food delivered, and boxes and boxes and plastic. Some, notice which companies are using either at least recycled, if not compostable, takeout containers, and patronize them. Some do and some don't. So you learn the hard way sometimes, but it's been horrible, and I sure hope we can get back to bringing in our own plastic containers or glass containers to the co-op, say, or other places. And I talked to Melissa Elkins at the co-op the other day and asked her, what's the story with this? When can we do this? And she's hopeful that soon they're going to be able. I was actually asking her about their recycle center, because that's a place where you can take soft plastics and other things as well, including batteries. And they had a whole little corner over there in the downtown store that I used to take stuff to all the time, and it's closed off right now too. So she says, well, that'll open up the same time that it's likely to open up the same time that we can bring in our own bulk food containers again, but she couldn't predict when. Wow.
Most of the grocery stores will actually allow you to bring in your own bags if you bag it yourself. They just don't want their employees bagging. So
right.
I take them to all of those.
Right, for your groceries, it's the bulk
grocery
food
bags. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the bulk food section that Hagen's has, and Co-op certainly have those in places I go. That you have to use their plastic clamshell things now and their jugs for liquids and such. At least they opened. At first they closed their entire and even Hagen's now still doesn't have a serve yourself kind of bulk food. They have all their bulk foods in little plastic clamshell containers for you to buy, and it's all priced. So it's been a huge hit, shall we say.
Any of that co-op info for the Seattleites by Giff Jones?
Sorry, Giff. I'm not aware enough of what's going on in Seattle. Ask around and ask. Go to the at East grocery store, for instance. Go to the counter where the customer service counter, and ask to talk to somebody who knows about their recycling program, and pitch what you can, and let them know, because if they don't hear from people that it should change, they won't change it. And ask them to put the plastic thing back if they don't have it anymore. Seattle is frankly screwed for recycling in general anyway, because you do single stream down there, and single stream is just polluted recycling because it just can't be separated. Once you put paper in with the other stuff, it just can't be separated. It's just mucked up, and then it's not worth anything. And it's convenient for the consumer, and that's why they went to do it. But it's a deceptive practice, I think, and all the recycle industry is suffering because of it. So that's a personal opinion, perhaps.
I'll also say that there's a lot here that Jaco's shared about how we could individually maintain better plastic policies by not using it or finding different ways to work with it. But also in terms of some of these other things, the coastal cleanups and monofilament line pickups and whatnot, this is something that if we don't have it, we can do it. So I just encourage people to be thinking about what really gets you enthused about something that should be done, and then to take a step forward. And if it's as simple as getting some neighbors together to socially distance and clean up the beach, that's great. Or just clean it up because you're down there enjoying the chance to get outside in nature. So that's the sort of thing that we can start at a grassroots level. And I know you get support from a lot of different organizations along the way.
Be sure to go to the handout, because I put all the websites and article references into a 3-page handout that you can link to directly, hopefully, from the PDF, and then learn more about all these things that I brought up, and there's more happening all the time. Some of these are very recent because I just picked them up last week, this month. Things are shifting all the time, and there are a lot, like Yes Magazine, for instance, from Bainbridge Island, is a magnificent portrayer of all the things that are possible, that people are actually doing, that we know how to do. The question is always, can we scale it up into enough of an effective change to have an impact on the problem? The technologies are out there, and the inventiveness is just burgeoning, but we need the political will, we need the corporative reduction instead of increasing of production of plastic, and we've got to advocate for that as well. And we'll go find the story of plastic movie, and other movies like that are exposing the big plastic left and right, but they are pretty impervious. And as long as they get away with it, they're going to keep making their money on petrochemical production because they're losing money on fuel now. And so they're counting on petrochemical production to keep their profit margin up. Big plastic, big oil.
Judy Long wanted to get some of those volunteer opportunities again, and I I wasn't fast enough to type them down in the answered section. Would you mind repeating some of those? That way I can type them out so they can have them.
Oh, I said SEA, salmon enhancement. You might know, Chris, salmon enhancement activists or advocacy or something. SEA is a wonderful local Bellingham organization that has a lot of opportunities to help out with things, and like cleaning rivers and taking tours of Nooksack in particular and whatnot. Resources for sustainable communities, capital RE Sources is a good group, as is Sustainable Connections, which is largely business related and helps businesses get closer to zero waste. Those are the ones I mentioned, I think.
Well, Washington Coast Savers are the ones that you saw the photo of, people gathering beach
Enhancement
refuse and whatnot, and so they are active in throughout Washington. Right?
Oh,
and
yes.
I think Jamie mentioned it was the North Sound Trout Association is doing the monofilament lines, but I'm sure they'd be happy to have some help with that if you know of some places that need some of that.
And thank you, Ann, for correcting me on Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association, NSEA.
Chris, what was that last one you mentioned? It was North.
Well, it's one that I saw that Jamie, you had mentioned was actually doing the monofilament line collection. It's a North Sound Trout Association.
Yeah, now, the North Sound Trouts Unlimited group, they've been installing monofilament recycle stations at popular fishing access points in Whatcom and Skagit counties, and they would love to have more volunteers. I know either install new ones or additional ones in new areas, or just go out and collect them when they fill up. That is usually the thing they need the most, is just when they fill up, someone needs to go out there, collect it all, take it to the recycler and let it fill up again, and then go back in the next month and do the same thing. And I know that they look for volunteers to kind of go on a circuit, just collecting the ones that maybe are near your area or where you live or where you like to recreate.
I'll put a shout out in for the Master Composter and Recycler program from Washington State University, the extension here in Bellingham, which has trained me and a number of other folks into helping with communities composting and recycling efforts. That program comes around every couple of years, and you can get trained in that as well. And the extension department there in Bellingham proper is very astute and does a lot of good work.
Also, that composter association that you worked with will do the zero waste at events. So they'll bring the recycling containers to large events, right, and collect it for you and help you figure out what to do and how to take care of the waste at any kind of events, which we're not having right now, but keep it in mind for later.
There's a national group called Toward Zero Waste that has a website with a lot of activities in different zones. And we have a part of Sustainable Connections is a zero waste group that does just what you say, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Towards zero waste. Yeah, and you know, the other thing is I was buying some winter gear, and what I found was that as I went through the stores, and I would get on my little phone here and Google the company that I wanted to buy something of, a fleece or whatever, and they actually, you know, if they're doing good recycling, you'll find it on their website, and they'll say, you know, what they're doing in terms of microbeads or, you know, synthetic fabrics, or whether it's goose down or fiberfill, or, you know. So it takes a little bit of effort sometimes to kind of investigate the practices that you're employing or the organizations that you're supporting with your dollars. But I think we can vote with our feet and our dollars, and just not buy it.
And our mouth and our typing. We can send emails to companies and corporations, pro and con, and those things add up. That's part of the democratic way.
It will make a change. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, someone was saying these are, you know, issues that should be given to Governor Inslee, and, you know, that he should mandate recycling policy for the state. But I'm wondering if you can speak on maybe a little bit of how, you know, politically we can voice ourselves as well. I would say just vote, you know, put your vote where your mouth is.
Well, and inquire of candidates where they stand on any of these issues, plastic pollution in particular. Listen to them sort of mouth platitudes, of course. They all know how to mouth platitudes, but challenge them to create action. We've got some good legislators from up here, legislators in the state who are helping. So keep reelecting those, but judge your campaigns by that kind of question, and ask those questions of the candidates, especially locally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then going to Olympia, of course, and actually knocking on doors and talking to the legislators that are down there and looking for what bills and whatnot are cooking. So it's just classic activism, political activism that has this filter, this lens, that wants to know what's happening about this awful plastic pollution.
Made a great point there about, you know, inquiring locally. You know, a lot of the stuff and change happens locally first.
So, and Jaco, is there any movement at all on the U.S. doing more recycling in our own country? Have you heard anything about that at all?
Well, there are, you know, here and there are success stories of recycling centers that have been able to retool. It tends to be the ones that are drawing upon consumers that are separating, at curbside separating. As I say, the reality of single stream recycling is that it gets to the recycling center a mess. And the amount of staff time and machinery that it takes to separate the gunked up paper that is just wrapped around all the plastic and the glass even and whatnot, it's just impossible. And so that the contamination level goes up, and that's what China's mandated. China used to have about 15%. They would accept up to 15% contamination in a big Borgian cube of pressed recycled whatever element it was. Then it went down to 5%. Then it went down to 1.5%. And now it's at 0.5% is what they will accept. And that's almost impossible to meet that standard. And so and that's why they did it that way. But even before that, the single stream places couldn't meet the contamination standards. So they ended up getting put in the landfill anyway. So until there's a market and better improvement, and there are people who are showing the way. You can look it up on the web and find some folks that are doing a better job of it, but they're not making any money at it. It's usually people that are financed by some other kind of group that has the money to pioneer how to do recycling right. So again, the scaling up has got to happen. Toot sweet. because otherwise we're just going to be mucking around in this garbage for the rest of our known existence.
There is an organization, and I'd have to look it up to see what it where it is, but I believe it is also in Iowa, and they are sending out cartons. So this was a gift to me. I was given a large carton box for soft plastics, and when it fills up, and believe me, I'm stomping it down and stomping it down, you can mail it back to them.
Sounds like TerraCycle.
Yes, that's it, and they will recycle it. Now, the person that gave it to me as a gift, they had to pay for that. So we're actually paying for our own recycling, but I don't think that's a bad idea. I think
yeah, that's the economic model it's working for TerraCycle. They're doing a good job of not just plastics, all kinds of different things that they're recycling. The co-op spends a fair amount of their annual budget paying for TerraCycle to take away their coffee bags, for instance, big coffee bags that they have, because they go through a lot of coffee bags at the and it's made of mylar. It's not soft. It's not the regular kinds of soft plastic. It's this silver mylar, and it gets separated and recycled separately. But TerraCycle will take it by mail, and they do, and they take other kinds of things as well. But it's true. It's a model where it's a shipping model, and you have to pay for the shipping process, the box and such. But it's a great idea for a gift. I like that idea as a gift.
Yeah,
It
really
starts the ball rolling for folks. Yeah.
Think of it for Christmas. Put a photo of a bird, your favorite seabird, on it.
The TerraCycle website is inspiring. It's really a great operation.
I have a question in the chat. Do we know what clothing companies manufacture fleece that is environmentally friendly?
Well, Patagonia is the prime suspect for that. I think they're great. And REI, it'd be worth asking at REI, asking somebody there. They have various brands, and to find out. And they're pretty astute folks at REI, so that they might have some other companies. I get all of my jackets secondhand places and such, and so I haven't been in the market for clothes at all, really.
In the reuse arena, yeah. But do actually check the labels and then Google it, because that's how I bought. Actually, it wasn't about.
Well, and the universal UPC symbol, or whatever it's called, that's so ubiquitous now. There's some clothing and some manufacturers that now have a symbol that you can put on you click with your cell phone, and it'll get you all the information. Well, you see it in grocery stores. Certainly, you can get all the information about the product on the shelf by clicking on the symbol, and going in your phone takes you right to a website that describes what the deeper contents are. And that's true for clothing, I think, in some cases.
We have to do a little legwork and then find the ones that we want to support. But I'm also thinking that somewhere someone is putting together a list of these environmentally friendly, plastic saving organizations. So
if folks are interested specifically around clothing, I actually happened to get a Patagonia catalog in the mail the other day, and this issue, their current fall winter catalog, actually goes quite in depth on the recycling and manufacturing process around 4 of the different materials, including polyester, fleece, down, and synthetic downs, and one other one that I can't recall. So I believe that's available probably through their website. You don't even have to get a catalog. You can probably view it on their website. But if you're just looking for information, you don't need to shop or anything like that. But they actually get just quite a bit of information around what the materials are and how they're used in the clothing manufacturing process, and how they have to recycle them and then sort of recreate the chemical structure to get the properties they're looking for in the products they're selling. And I thought just the information and stories about that was very informational, particularly when you're going out to shop or look for items.
And just a note about that too, that that down, some of the ways that down is gathered is incredibly inhumane to the animals. But there are organizations that make clothing organizations that make down that's environmentally and socially acceptable, they don't live pluck the birds. So the food is used, and then once the animal is dead, of course, then they take the feathers, and that's really, what you're looking for, because if you ever see photos of what happens to the birds that are plucked live, it's not pretty. So don't think of down as an alternative until you find that they're actually using humane practices.
Mm. Right, we have a great distinction made here in the chat about the difference between making clothing from recycled plastic as opposed to the washing of fleece that releases microfibers in the washing process, and that's a good distinction to make. And it's just a function of the insidious nature of what are called nurdles, those little plastic pellets that break down so far, but into these tiny little petals that cover the beaches in some places, like in the middle of the Pacific, and they peel off of the fabrics that are made, and it's sad, but until we can stop it, it's going to keep happening if people don't pay attention and make noise about it. So make noise, people. Make good trouble, as John Lewis would say.
On that note, we're quite a bit over on our time, but yes, continue to make noise for sure. And thank you all. Thank you, Audubon and Jaco and Chris. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the program. I thought it was very interesting and I learned a lot. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to plug that next month we have another program virtually sponsored and hosted by the Whatcom Museum. So next month's program is all about the Great Goat Roundup. So we're going to be having somebody speaking about the translocation of mountain goats from the Olympic Mountains to the Cascade Mountains. And that's a multi-year endeavor that many organizations, the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, State Wildlife, other conservation organizations have been working on for a multi-year project that's been wrapping up this year. So please tune in next month and you can hear all about that exciting project.
Alrighty, I'll definitely see you then.
Okay, I guess we're done.
Yeah, have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Kelsey.
For coming.
Jamie, take care, y'all. Chris, talk to you later.